So it's been a while since I've been able to post any videos. A lot's happened over the past few months. You may notice that I am not in my garage, at least not the garage that you've seen in my previous videos. I am in my shed, and that's because I've moved, and the shed here is going to have to serve as my garage for a while, at least until I can build something better. I've moved into a house, and I have much larger property than I have in the past, and I'm actually going to build a shop, a steel building, probably next summer. That's my plan anyway. And so in the meanwhile, I've had to figure out how to keep all my projects going. Excuse me, it's really hot in here. So I had to put the Mustang in storage. I didn't want to leave it outside exposed all this time, at least until I can build a garage to put it in. So I put it in a storage unit. But that doesn't mean I want to stop that project completely. I've got to work on other things to keep me going in the meanwhile, smaller projects, and obviously I'll have more time for my kayak. But I do want to keep the Mustang project going. And one of the things that I'm working on right now is trying to figure out what to do about the fuel system. The fuel system on these cars from the factory doesn't give you much fuel. I remember running around in my 77. My 77 was a factory 4-cylinder car, so all it had was the 12-gallon tank in it. And, I couldn't go but a couple hundred miles on that at best. I was getting probably 7-8 miles to the gallon, and so on a good day I might see 175 to 200 miles. But gas back then was like $1 a gallon, so it wasn't as big a deal then as it is now. But what I want to do with this Mustang is I want to be able to go further without having to stop for gas. I'm not so much worried about the fuel mileage. It's not going to be great. You're talking about a 347 stroker, but it will be fuel injected, so it won't be awful. But I definitely want to be able to go more than 150 miles without stopping for gas. The factory V8 cars, specifically the 78 factory V8 cars. I'm not sure if it was factory in 77 or not. It may have just been an option, but in 78, all of the V8 cars in 78 came with an auxiliary fuel tank in the left wheel well that brought the total fuel up to about 16, right at about 16 gallons of gas. Better, but still not quite enough. I've got some options that I'm considering, and I'm going to sort of talk through those in this video, and if anybody out there has suggestions or better ideas, I'm open. I haven't settled on anything in particular. So let me take a minute to drag out the factory fuel tank, the main tank and the auxiliary tank, so you can see what I'm talking about if you haven't seen these things in person before. Okay, so this is the main fuel tank, and that's the auxiliary fuel tank. So this sits in the back of the car, and I'll crawl under the car and show you what the structure looks like, but it's level across the bottom, more or less, and then it's got a raised part here, and then a lower part here. This is where the spare tire well in the car sits. So this tank sits directly below the spare tire well, and so it drops down here because of that. There's a single outlet on the bottom of the fuel tank for the fuel supply, and then a connector for the fuel sending unit here. So that installs from the front. And then on this side of the car, if you're in a 4 or 6-cylinder car, or any car without the auxiliary fuel tank, then this line goes up through the wheel well, behind the driver's side rear tire, and into the fender well where the fuel filler is. On the factory 78 V8 cars, and possibly an option 77. I'm really not sure. Is this auxiliary fuel tank, and I got to be careful because mine's got some fire ants in it because I live in Florida. But this lower opening attaches here to the fuel tank, and this sits in the wheel well directly behind the driver's side rear tire. On the top of it is a vent line. This vent line actually comes down and connects to the top of the main fuel tank, so it allows the main fuel tank to vent into the auxiliary tank, and then the aux tank vents out the fuel filler cap. And then on top of the aux tank is the fuel return. So the fuel return comes all the way from the front of the car back into here. And the return line and the vent also connect into the charcoal canister line. The charcoal canister is located in the front of the car, passenger side, forward wheel well, aft of the tire. And so this is the fuel setup that you get factory in a 78 V8 car. All told, total about 16 gallons of fuel, which is not very much. And so I need to do something about it in order to give me some more range. Now, these are readily available, the fuel tank. There are subtle differences year to year. This lip and this flange is a little different on a couple years. You can see it's bent up here in this corner. That's different on some years. There's several different outlets you can go to get a brand new fuel tank for these cars. They make one type, and it'll fit most of the cars, but you may have to do some subtle hammer work or bending work in order to get it to fit. But you can get if you want to stick with the stock setup, you can get a brand new tank, and you can get brand new mounting straps pretty easily for these, and just go ahead and replace it. But for me, I'm looking for something different because I want more range, I want more capacity. I'm also looking for safety. So a fuel cell's not out of the realm of possibilities. Haven't decided on that yet. But I'm going to talk through a couple different options, or show a couple different options, some of the things that I'm looking at. And haven't made a decision yet, though. This is what it looks like under the back end of the car. I'm on the ground on the driver's side looking towards the passenger side. And the prominent well in the middle of the image is the spare tire well in the trunk. So you can see the leaf spring on the opposite side of the car. The bottom of the fuel tank sits about even with that. And if you'll recall from the from actually seeing the tank, it was shallower on that side of the car because of that well. But then on the side closest to me, the trunk floor is higher up, so the fuel tank raises up in that location. And so that's why it's got that shape to it. It fits right in position here. Now, I think whatever solution I go with, if I decide to go aftermarket, I'm probably going to cut the spare tire well out of the car. The wheels and tires that I'm putting on the car, a spare is not going to fit in there anyway. I'm switching to 5 lug, and it's a Mustang bolt pattern, 5 on 4.5. And the wheels that are going on, at least initially, I don't know if they'll be permanent on the car or not, but they're 245/45 16s on a set of Torque Thrust D wheels. They're going to look great on the car, but that's not going to fit in the spare tire well. It's several inches wider than the stock tire was. And so I guess I could probably get a donut for a Mustang and carry that around. But I think I'd probably like to solve the fuel tank piece of it and then figure out the spare tire later. So I'll probably end up cutting this out and then dealing with the rest of the story after. Um, if you'll notice on the right side of the picture, there's a pretty stout structural member um, aft of the wheel, the spare tire well. It's on the primarily on the driver's side. You can see it here, but it wraps around behind, and there's a piece on the passenger side as well. And then same thing forward of where the fuel tank is on the driver's side of the car. There's a structural member there, and there's one on the passenger side as well. There's quite a bit of reinforcement under the rear of the car. Um, it's kind of crazy. There's nothing connecting the front half to the back half, but the front half and the back half of the car are built pretty stout. As a matter of fact, if you're ever considering maybe mini tubbing one of these cars, you might want to consider not cutting out a lot of the structure and actually tying into it, because it's pretty good reinforcement. And so I'm going to have to consider that when I do, if I do cut out this spare tire well, to make room for a tank in this location. This is a view in the left aft wheel well, driver's side. You can just make out the tire in the bottom of the picture there. And the space behind this tire, this is where that auxiliary fuel tank sits. It's kind of in a pocket aft of the wheel well opening. And it's a plastic tank, and then there's a metal guard that goes between the tire and the tank to protect it from rocks and so forth. So it's pretty well protected from the tire. I don't know how well protected it would be from side impact. I imagine it would just rupture. But I don't think I'm going to use it moving forward. I think whatever solution I go with will involve a larger single primary tank, ideally 20 or even 22 gallons. I think the most likely or easiest solution is probably just a rectangular fuel cell like this RCI fuel cell shown here. This one is a good quality unit. It's got a polycarbonate fuel cell encased in a steel outer layer. It's foam filled, and it's got a flange all the way around. And so, in order to mount this, I could cut the spare tire well out, reinforce a perimeter, a rectangular perimeter, and then drop this in from the top. So the bulk of it would be below the level of the trunk floor, which means I would have a mostly useful trunk, and then have my increased fuel capacity. It's a pretty straightforward solution. Another option, of course, would be to make the trunk floor flat and just stick this in the trunk on top of it. You see that solution a lot. Um, but I don't like the idea of losing the trunk completely. It's not like I'm going to go grocery shopping in the car, but the occasional overnight trip or road trip is certainly not out of the question. And it would be nice to still have a trunk. And so this is probably the easiest and most straightforward solution. But I do have another interesting one that I want to show. This is a fuel cell made by a company called Procell. It's intended to be a replacement for the stock tank in a 65-66 Mustang. This one's made out of stainless steel. It's foam filled. You can see the large fuel filler or fuel panel on the top to give you access inside. This one has a ton of options besides foam fill. You can get the fuel tank, fuel quantity sending unit built into it. You can get a surge box built into it. You can have an in-tank pump installed in it. All sorts of options that you can have built right in by the manufacturer. The fuel tank in the 65-66 Mustang mounts very similar to what I described for the RCI fuel cell. There's just a rectangular opening in the trunk, and the fuel tank goes in the trunk and down through the opening. It sits on the flange that you can see in this picture. The holes in those cars are kind of all over the place, so you got to match up the flange to your particular car, which is why it comes undrilled. But they're pretty straightforward to install. And if I was going to install one of these in my car, it would be very similar to what I've already described. I'd cut out the spare tire well, make and reinforce a rectangular opening, and then set the tank down in. On the 6566 Mustang, the fuel tank sits about even with the trunk floor. This one you can see sits several inches above the flange. That's because this is a full 22-gallon fuel cell. But what I find interesting about it is on the 6566 Mustang, the fuel filler is on the center of the back of the car, below the trunk opening. So the fuel filler cap is, very prominent in the center, on the rear of the car, and well recognized. Anybody that's seen one of these cars will know exactly what I'm talking about. What's interesting is on the 78 Mustang that I'm working on, the opening where this would come out would end up right where the license plate is. And so, conceivably, I could convert my car to a flip down license plate fuel fill, which would mean I wouldn't have to open up the trunk in order to fill the fuel cell, um, which, it works. People do it every day. But honestly, when you're doing that, you're filling the trunk of the car with fuel fumes. And that has the potential for a good amount of danger. And so, if I could fill it through the back of the car, for instance, converting to a flip down license plate, and filling it that way, that would be, I think, safer. It would also be kind of cool. I always liked flip down license plate fuel fill cars. Um, I thought they were a cool way of doing it. Um, you can also pull up to whatever pump you want, and it doesn't matter which side you're on, which gives you more options. But um, this is definitely a more expensive solution than the RCI uh, uh, fuel cell would be. It's a little bit higher quality, and when you start adding in the options, for instance, my car is going to be fuel injected. I could have installed in a surge box the correct rated pump right from the manufacturer here. Of course, that would increase the cost of the fuel cell, but it would also simplify my installation. So. Um, it's an interesting option. I'm not sure which way I'm going to go. And certainly, if you have any suggestions or ideas that you think might work well for this car, go ahead and let me know. I'm open. I'm not tied into any solution yet. Still exploring ideas. So that's where I am right now. And if you have any ideas, again, let me know. And thanks for watching.